Welcome to the sit down. Joining me is David Strange, immigration attorney at Wittenberg Law Firm, as well as an adjunct professor at Texas Tech Law School. And also you work with the Dream Resource Center. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what you do in that regard. What does the Dream Resource Center do?
Okay. The Dream Resource Center is a service offered over on the main campus of Texas Tech University, and it's a service offered to students, but also faculty and administrative personnel for people who have immigration issues, immigration concerns. Primarily, the focus is on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. There are many students in Texas, in the state of Texas, who have received DACA, and Texas Tech is a Hispanic serving institution, and so in Texas Tech's efforts to service all of its students, faculty, etc., the Dream Resource has been established for that purpose.
Sure, and I know you can't go into like a lot of detail about individuals or anything like that, but is it utilized quite frequently? Are people aware of it and coming to utilize that service?
It's a new center.
Okay.
And so I don't think the entire campus knows about it, including the people who could benefit from the Dream Resource Center. But word is beginning to get out, and people are coming in, and we've already helped several people.
Great. Well, hopefully this gets some of that out there as well. So
Sure.
hopefully people will see this. Since we're sort of on that subject, it'd be a nice segue. There's been just recently, there's been a lot of news about all kinds of issues concerning immigration. One of those is DACA. There was a judge who upheld that DACA needed to stay, and then the state of Texas, there's a lawsuit. Give us the lay of the land as it concerns DACA at the moment.
Well, so DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a program from the Obama administration enacted through executive action, saying that for a specific group of people, the government is going to defer taking any action, hence deferred action. So it's relief from removal. But with that relief, a person can seek a work authorization, can get a driver's license, and previously could even get a travel permit. So there was a student here at Texas Tech who, a couple of students who had DACA, but were able to travel on medical missions with Texas Tech University. So travel, but there was a lot of controversy because Congress, per the Constitution, has exclusive jurisdiction over immigration. Nevertheless, the president has the executive branch has some flexibility, some maneuvering that he can do. And so the President, Obama, through his presidential prerogative, said, well, okay, we're going to go forward to protect this group of people. In immediate controversy, and then of course President Obama tried to extend the DACA program and also introduce the DAPA, but some 26 states, led by Texas, sued, and the expanded DACA was prevented and the DAPA was prevented. So that the DAPA was the deferred action for certain parents. Okay, so DACA, the original DACA stays in place. President Trump comes along, in part campaigning against DACA, and true to his word, early in his administration, he took steps to rescind DACA. All right, lawsuits were filed. A federal court in California says, well, you did not take the proper administrative steps. You didn't take the proper legal steps. Now we have a whole group of people who have sort of vested interest now. And so the court in California says, all right, no more new DACAs, but those people who have already received DACA can renew their DACA. All right, and then we have now just recently a federal court in Washington, D.C. that says, well, no, we're not going to limit it to just renewing DACA, but DACA's opened up completely. So even those who haven't had DACA before can apply for DACA. But then, of course, we have a lawsuit in the Southern District of Texas, again led by Texas, challenging DACA itself. Interestingly and purposefully, it's the same judge that put a halt to the DAPA and the expanded DACA. So there's some strategy there. They selected this judge for
specifically because of his past decision
That's
on
right.
this exact issue.
That's right.
So what does that mean for students who are currently here under DACA, and for those who maybe saw that first ruling and were like, okay, now it's my turn, and
Yep.
now what's the timeline? When would that change? How does that work?
Yep. Good question. So the judge in Washington, D.C. says, okay, this is my ruling, and now I'm going to give the government, say, a month or so to respond, to come up with something to maybe, affect this ruling. So the DACA hasn't been reopened yet. The order's in place, but the government has some time to respond and to prepare for this order. But assuming nothing changes, then DACA will open up completely. But now we run into a very tricky issue. What happens if the judge in South Texas puts a stop to all of DACA?
Sure.
So now you have a judge in a federal district court in California, a federal district court in Washington, and now potentially a federal district court in Texas at odds with one another. So what do? I would assume that the Trump administration would go with the judge in Texas.
Okay, and they could make that decision.
And just halt everything. Yeah, the government would just say, well, we don't know what to do because we've got conflicting decisions.
Okay.
And so then it would be up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if the U.S. Supreme Court didn't do anything, I think the Trump administration would just hang its hat on the Southern District
ruling
of Texas
which
decision.
would set precedent for things that they've done and said and everything else. And
It's because that's what they want.
sure. Which, speaking of what they want, and we've kind of touched on a little bit, but one thing that I think is interesting that has kind of come up is the Trump administration's philosophy on immigration and maybe how that differs from past presidencies. In your opinion, someone who's been involved in this arena for a very long time, what is their sort of philosophy of immigration and immigrants in American life?
Well, based on my experience, this administration, in terms of immigration, is unlike any other administration that I've known.
Sure.
But I think in part, President Trump is acting according to what his base wants. So he campaigned on drain the swamp. So in some sense, a very conservative component of the Republican Party. And this component is generally anti-immigration. Well, I should say anti-illegal immigration, not anti-immigration, but anti-illegal immigration. And I think that's a big difference. So on one hand, I think President Trump is responding to his base. And on the other hand, I think he's very much a business-driven mentality.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And I think he sees a lot of bad deals with illegal immigration, with NAFTA, with what he perceives as Washington caving in to interests that don't align with U.S. interests, with Johnny Lunchbucket, your average Joe. And so I think there are two components there. One, he's playing to his base, but also I think that he sees this through an economic lens. And in part, he sees bad deals with illegal immigration and how illegal immigration affects the pocketbook of average U.S. citizens.
So that's always the rhetoric, right? That these illegal immigrants are coming over, taking jobs, taking government resource. Is there truth to that? What's the actual facts of what illegal immigrants are actually doing in our country?
Yeah, I think that's a real good question. But let me preface it by saying that I think at this point, some of President Trump's response has been ego-driven. He gets things done. And his efforts to combat illegal immigration hasn't necessarily been working. And so he says, well, you know, I'm a doer. I'm going to get things done. And so he's come up with this zero tolerance policy that, of course, led to separations of parents from their children's. And so I think that's a third component. It's part ego. And so now that comes up to your question, well, what's the truth? Do illegal immigrants affect the economy? Well, so you have a group of people who say, you know, without certain undocumented workers, a head of lettuce in the grocery store rather than $1 is going to be $5. What do you prefer? $1 head of lettuce or a $5 head of lettuce? And there are whole sectors of the economy that might just crumble. Roofing, agriculture, you know, crops rot in the field very fast. Restaurants, construction, just a number of areas where, you know, there's a really strong argument that we just have a shortage of these particular workers. So there was a raid in Amarillo about 10 years ago on one of the meat packing plants. And just prior to the raid and at the time of the raid, some very conservative people came out and said, no problem, U.S. workers are going to come in and take the place of these undocumented aliens to fill the jobs at this meatpacking plant. The raid happens, and where were the U.S. workers?
They didn't show up.
And so these meatpacking plants had to bus in refugees from places like Houston and Dallas. And so today in Amarillo, there's a huge Somalian population, in part because they were bussed in. Wow. To fill jobs. So these meatpacking plants advertised, you know, hey, we need jobs. You know, we've been raided. They didn't say that.
Yeah, but essentially that was the idea.
We need people. Yeah. And so now you have people who don't in Amarillo who don't like all the Somalians. And say, well, you shouldn't have raided the
sure, yeah. So there's an argument on both sides of this to where the idea of, well, they're taking resources and everything else and it hurts our economy. There's proof, and this example here is that it's actually the opposite, that illegal immigrants in some ways help the economy because of taking jobs that maybe other people don't want or that they're obviously not showing up to do, and then also keeping prices down in certain regards.
In the end, it really depends on who you talk to. And so there are some African American academics who say, you know, we're not against illegal immigration. And then there are some who say, well, we're against illegal immigration because illegal immigrants take away certain types of jobs, you know, that African Americans might otherwise have access to. So
it's nuanced, it's complex.
That's right. It depends on who you're talking to.
Okay.
And I think the answer lies in both. In some areas, illegal immigration very much benefits the economy. But in other areas, there is a detrimental effect. And so it's like you say, it's nuanced, it's how you want to present it, and it depends on who you're talking to. But overall, I think most people who study this issue will say that illegal immigration, or the people are a benefit to the economy. But more importantly, if those people were suddenly removed, we would have huge vacuums and our economy would take a very serious hit. And then that would have a ripple effect all the way down to me and you and just your average citizen. Because at this point, you know, we've had years and years and years of illegal immigration. Many of those years, the United States turned in a blind eye. because of the benefit to the economy. And so can we suddenly rise up and say, okay, you're all gone, and there not be a detrimental impact? No, that can't happen.
Another issue that has come up recently, and I think I may have a little bit off, so I'm bringing this up so that you can clarify and sort of explain this a little bit. A lot of the immigration policies in the Trump administration have been said to have been designed by Stephen Miller, one of his top advisors, and the most recent one being an issue with people who are, I'm going to use some of the rhetoric that's used, that are in line to try to become American citizens, and that they're looking through their histories, and if they've utilized certain government programs, then maybe that removes them from the line. That would be the way that I sort of understood it, but that may be wrong. Can you clarify what that is and what actually that issue is concerning?
Well, the in-line part, that probably refers to quotas. So there are, every year about 1 million people immigrate to the United States. Of the people who immigrate, some are immediate relatives, and there is no line for those because there's no quota. There are processing times, but there's no line. For other people who are in the preference categories, not that they receive preferential treatment, but in preference categories below the immediate relative. So an immediate relative would be a U.S. citizen who's married to a foreign national spouse.
That's one we hear about a lot, right?
Yeah.
There's a French movie in the 1980s, I recall, called Green Card, where that's the whole subject matter. But that's the one we hear. Yeah. That's the stereotypical idea we have, is somebody marries a foreigner.
But there are other types of family immigration, which is to say siblings. Adult siblings can file for a sibling who's not a U.S. citizen. LPRs, lawful permanent residents, can file for his or her spouse and their minor children or their unmarried sons and daughters. U.S. citizens can file petitions for adult sons and daughters. So now we're talking about the chain migration that President Trump has sometimes referred to. So the U.S. citizen marries the Frenchman, and then suddenly the Frenchman files petitions for his siblings. Okay. And so President Trump says, what are we doing? How does that benefit us? So that we got to eliminate this chain migration. So maybe that's the in line that you're referring to. Okay, anybody who attempts to enter the United States or who seeks to enter the United States, whether as an immigrant or a non-immigrant, has to be admissible. And there are various grounds of inadmissibility. And some of the grounds of inadmissibility might include misuse of government benefits, for example. So maybe that's what you're referring to. And so the Trump administration hasn't changed that law because the laws come through Congress. But what has changed is the policy approach to enforcing those laws.
Similar to what you had said earlier, where the government has kind of turned a blind eye to certain things, we're seeing that they're no longer turning a blind eye. Is that?
Yes, that's a good way to describe it, yes. Okay,
and so they're essentially enforcing things that are on the books that past administrations have not really
been sort of lax about.
I see. Okay. Yep. And where that sort of intersects with this next question or topic that I want to discuss is the separation of parents and their children. A lot of rhetoric from the conservative side, the Republican side, was, well, this is just what Obama was doing the same thing, but people just care now because the Trump administration is doing it. Is that true? Is there a difference between what the Obama administration was doing concerning that issue and what the Trump administration did?
Well, there's clearly a difference in that the Trump administration has the zero tolerance policy. The Obama administration never had that zero tolerance policy. So the Trump administration, perhaps through whisperings from Stephen Miller, but also maybe perhaps driven by President Trump's ego in that, look, I set out to solve this problem and I'm just not solving it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with this zero tolerance policy, which is, all right, if someone enters the United States unlawfully and we catch them, and it could be even someone who's, and this was part of the flack, it could be someone seeking asylum. And so the Trump administration says, all right, Zero tolerance. So we're going to deport you, and we're also going to charge you with a federal crime, because immigration, in addition to being a civil administrative offense, can also be a federal crime. But not all federal crimes are prosecuted. But President Trump says we're going to prosecute all these federal crimes. And so the Trump administration says, all right, so you're being processed criminally because you're an adult, you've committed the crime, but your children, now we're going to separate you from the parents because the children aren't being charged with the federal crime. So you go this way, and now you go this way. And so I think in part, the Trump administration was trying to send out a message to would-be illegal or asylum seekers that if you come with your kids, you're going to lose your kids.
It's going to be tough. Yeah.
It's going to be tough. But I think what the Trump administration didn't realize, or Stephen Miller didn't realize, for many of these people who are fleeing very bad situations, they're willing to come here, lose their kids, so long as their kids are out of this bad situation and have a chance for a better future. Many of those people are willing to do that. So that threat is not going to deter them. And in fact, they may see it as an opportunity, say, okay, yes, I'll sacrifice myself because the government's going to take the kids and take care of the kids.
Yeah.
And so, but also there was a lot of flack from the media, the poor coverage.
Yeah.
You're separating these kids. And so the Trump administration says, okay, well, then we're just going to detain everybody together. And the Trump administration can't do that. So going back to the 1980s or so, there was a young girl, about 15, 16 years old, who filed a lawsuit against the practice of the federal government doing just that, because she was 15, 16 years old, and she was being housed in a detention center with adult men. So she filed a lawsuit saying, you should not imprison me with adult males.
Sure.
And even the United States government says, whoa, that's a recipe for a bad outcome.
Absolutely, sure.
And so the outcome of that was something called the Flores settlement. And the Flores settlement says you can't detain children with adults. So President Trump's solution to the problem that he created is just another problem.
I see. We are running short on time, but one thing I want to bring up that's been something that's talked about his whole campaign and everything else is a wall. In your opinion, what would a wall have the desired effect of the Trump administration wants?
Well, in part, but the United States could come up with a Star Trek type force field around the whole country, above, below, and all sides, and there would still be illegal immigration. And that's because the vast number of people unlawfully present in the United States were allowed to enter lawfully in the first place. So the wall would have some effect, but it's not going to address completely, or even in the majority sense, it's illegal immigration, because there are other avenues of illegal immigration. The wall also, brings up questions of, the environmental questions. The river moves.
Yeah, sure.
Are you going to put a wall in the northern border with Canada, and the expense?
Private property, a lot of the property along the border is owned individually.
And how's a wall going to combat human ingenuity? I saw a cartoon. The wall was being built and a ladder shop was opening up right next to the wall. And the point is human ingenuity. But nevertheless, walls do send a message. And walls have worked in other areas. Look at the refugee crisis in Europe, in Hungary, for example. The barbed wire fences. Walls can work in some ways. Yeah. But is the cost too much for the gain?
For the desired effect, yeah. Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much for being here. It's a very complex and nuanced issue that I don't think always gets the full discussion that it deserves. So I really appreciate you coming on and helping us kind of parse through some of these issues, because they're coming rapidly. Every day it seems like there's a new
Yes.
there's a new story on some type of immigration topic in our country.
Yes, well, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. For more episodes, go to kttz.org. Thank you for watching The Sit Down.